What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and in this video we're going to talk about the boss design for Darkest Dungeon as a series, both the second game and the first game, mostly focusing on the second one because there is a pretty big issue that I feel needs to be addressed. Normally I don't publicly criticize the game, at least in video format, because I have avenues to drop my criticisms directly, so I don't feel the need to, point out everything that I dislike. But I feel that this is an interesting topic to discuss, so I'm going to make a video on it, and let me know what you're thinking down below. If you agree, disagree, whatever, just be civil. Alright, and so in this video we're going to be discussing, as I said, boss design. And one big issue that the game has with boss design, especially in the second game, is that it seems the only super threatening thing that they give a boss is the ability to hit the entire party. Sometimes people call this AoE, so like area of effect. I call it cleave, as in cleaving through a group of people and stuff. And so that's what a lot of the bosses have, and it didn't really jump out to me at first. But then the more I thought about the bosses and what I dislike about some of them, it all came down to them hitting your entire party, either just normally, or if you mess something up, they hit your entire party for it. And the reason that this happens is because, at least from my understanding, like just as an outside observer, no insider knowledge or whatever, but in DD2, healing is a bit harder to do. And so since it's harder to do, then what's the best way to, stretch that resource thinner, hit everyone? So you have to triage, prioritize who's going to get saved. So in concept, I understand that. It doesn't need to be on, the majority of encounters though. And so we're going to talk about a lot of them that have it. Or start with, so spoilers, you're going to see a lot of bosses. I'm going to talk about a lot of bosses. So both games, DD2 and 1. So there's your warning. And the first is Shambler. Shambler is interesting because Shambler does hit your entire party with everything to just wear you down, and then the summons try and, do the majority of the damage. So this is actually an example of it being largely okay, but like the concept is still there. It's like, how do we make something threatening? It hits everyone. And so all of Shambler's attacks hit your entire party. They do damage over time. And the third one, Stentorious Lament, will shuffle your party. And so the reason I kind of forgive Shambler is because the more threatening thing from this encounter is it beats you not so much by hitting your whole party, it beats you by turn efficiency. So Shambler is a fight where you really have to prioritize what to hit and when. So you have to decide if you're killing the summons or if you're putting damage into the boss, and you have to juggle those around while also noticing what turns are available. And then sometimes your team gets moved out of position and you have to spend turns fixing that. So it's an action economy fight. So I think it's a bit overtuned now, or at least the rewards suck for it, but I do think it's okay. I think this is a decent example in this game, but the idea is there, right? It hits everyone. Librarian. Throughout the fight, Librarian uses Burning Bright, which, after it destroys a book stack or whatever, it'll use this. It hits the whole party, but it's only a couple times until Librarian ignites. Once Librarian ignites, it just hits your team over and over with everything. So it's like an MMO in Rage Timer. Were you too slow? Did you mess up? Congrats, he's hitting your entire team. You're not surviving more than a few turns. And it's like the earliest example that they throw at you, so it's not like this boss isn't unbalanced by any means, or imbalanced. It's pretty fair, but that's again just pointing out what I'm talking about. It's like, how do we make this threatening? It hits everyone. Leviathan is cool. The main thing is the hand mechanic. But the same thing applies. It has a debuff that hits everyone. It's fog, so people are gonna, say that. It's like, oh, it's an environmental effect. It's supposed to be that way. I'm just saying that it hits everyone. All right. And then we have Tidal Surge, which is another move it has. So when the hand, I think when the hand's alive, yeah, when the hand's alive, it does this. It'll Tidal Surge the party, hits everyone. Dreaming General. Did you mess up keeping the roots under control? Well, your whole party gets nightmared. You know, again, AoE damage attack that punishes you because, you know, you messed up. So it's another one, right? Hits everyone. Harvest Child, I would say, is probably the best design lair boss, because even though it has attacks that hit a couple people at a time, you know, between what Harvest Child's doing and also the hunger attacks hit the front two or the back two, it's okay because there's stuff going on where you can move your party around to mitigate it. You can move the boss backwards so you don't take as much damage, and you can move people around so you can disrupt who's getting up front with the hunger tokens, which means there's a lot of ways to play around it. And it's not so much the game punishing you for doing something wrong, or, you know, it thinks that's the way to escalate the threat. It's just everything is designed with that in mind, and so it's a more enjoyable experience, at least to me. So I don't mind this boss hitting a couple people every time, because it's very clear when it's going to do what, and it's very clear how many options you have for it. There are so many ways to counteract what this boss is doing. You know, you can bring holy water to cleanse debuffs. There are certain skills that remove debuffs. You can immobilize someone in rank 1 to block the hunger effect. You can move people in front of other people so they don't move up to rank 1 to eat and stuff. So there are a lot of ways around it. High debuff resist, if you can find that. And that's why I like this fight. But there are enemies in this area, the Fetter, like Lord, that, you know, what do? They hit the whole party with baneful breath. They can just do this, give you some disease, stress you out, and just generally annoying, you know, just over and over hitting everyone, although this one's not as bad. Swine Skyver. What does everyone remember about this boss? It hits 3 out of 4, or not boss, this enemy. It hits 3 out of 4 people. It's only got 2 or 3 attacks. It's got a retreat move. Spit to Roast is arguably just as dangerous because it stuns you and sends someone to the back, but cripple them. This is the skill in both games, the first game and the second game, that is very dangerous and you don't want to get hit by. It can just do it as long as it's not in rank 1. Ghoul's pretty annoying because it can stun lock you and stuff, but what's the most silly attack that it has in both games? It has Howl, which hits your entire party with stress and it lowers your torch. This can be very dangerous in certain situations, and it diseases you. So it's like, you know, there's another thing. Most threatening thing it can do is hit your entire party. Implication. This is the Pillager mini boss. And what happens in this fight? You know, if you don't kill the other bandits fast enough to pull it forward, it hits your entire party. It hits less people the further forward it is, but that's the whole thing's goal, is to hit your entire party. And then we come to the mountain bosses. There are no pictures here in the wiki, but 3 out of 5 of these kind of follow that trend. So Act 1 does not, thankfully. This is more the stuns and all that are what's annoying, but Resentment. Did you mess up? You didn't bring enough reach, or, you know, you missed because you were blinded by one of the attacks. You get your entire party cleaved down. Obsession. Were you too slow? Oh, now all the scene tokens are on your party. They get cleaved down. Did you crit a couple times? Oh, your entire team gets suppressed. Like that's the only thing with this fight, is it hits hard and it hits everyone. And then Ambition. The first 2 phases are okay. Third phase hits everyone twice per turn. And then Cowardice, pretty good fight actually, very well designed. Now we're going to come to some examples of, again, actually good encounters to show that we don't have to have enemies that hit everyone, you know, to be threatening. Exemplar and Worship as a whole, as a mechanic, are very good because it forces target priority, and you can still use some control moves to help disrupt it. Like you can daze, even stun if you can get lucky enough to get it. and slow down stuff like worship. There's also items that counteract worship. And so because of this, Exemplar is an amazing fight. And I think it's the best boss in this game. So the main mechanic is the combo token. This boss can hit 2 people at a time and summon extra help and stuff like that, and that's okay. You know, it's giving you the softer area attacks in between, except for exaltation, in between, you know, hitting one person really hard and picking on them. But you have ways around this. So the normal move that you have to worry about is Prelude. That hits one person, pulls them forward, and blights them, and then also combos them. If you have a combo token, you get hit by the Fall, which is the other move in the combo. And that that gives it the worship, so it can summon extra people. And this is actually something you can work around for most of the encounter, which is nice. You can bring holy water to cleanse it. You can time your guards and taunts properly to get around it, you know, so it can't actually hit you with the Fall. And then the other thing that people often forget is that the Fall doesn't reach rank 4, so the very back of your party, if you can get someone back there, they're safe. And so there's a lot of ways to mitigate this. There are items like, actually I think I talked about it already, Shredded Decency removes worship, so that's another way to interact with it, and it's a really good encounter for that reason. It's a control fight, you know, and it's not, oh, I messed up and my entire team gets, you know, destroyed instantly for it. It's more one person might die, but there's a lot of ways to play around it. And this was still a thing in DD1, so we're going into DD1 spoilers, but it wasn't as common, and I have an interesting idea as to why. But again, that's something we'll see if you agree or disagree. But just to show you a lot of the region bosses, which are basically the same thing as, like, you know, Librarian, Leviathan, all that. In DD1, you know, we have Necromancer. Yeah, he can hit a couple people sometimes, but what's the main thing he does? He summons monsters. And so summoning monsters, the whole, you know, encounter, can progressively wear you down because sometimes you have to kill them, and then the boss moves farther back, so your team needs some reach or a way to pull them back forward. So it's like one of the easiest fights in the game. It's pretty much the tutorial boss, but it's a good teaching tool as an encounter, you know, so I like it. Prophet is another one. Prophet can hit the entire party with one move to try and finish you off, but the main thing it's doing is it's nuking 1 or 2 people at a time with a really big attack. And so this is a lot like Exemplar in that way, where there are ways to mitigate it. You can move people around, you can guard, you can spam a bunch of protection to increase your damage resistance, and that's cool. You know, there are ways to mitigate the other threat. So, you know, this thing, the Prophet hitting your entire team for like 2 damage and blighting them isn't the threat. The threat is the other mechanic. The other thing is just to finish you off if you made a, you know, bad choice, but it's a better use of a cleave attack, in my opinion. Swine Prince is interesting because the main mechanic is Wilbur, the little pig that he comes with, will mark 1 or 2 people in the party. And so again, you can mitigate it by guarding, blocking, you know, getting protection, dodge, whatever. There are a lot of ways around it. And what's interesting though is that this boss does, you know, cleave your entire team down if you make a mistake, and the mistake is attacking or killing Wilbur. But you know, you do it once and the game kind of implies that you shouldn't be doing that. And also, if you're paying attention, you'll learn not to do that. You go, oh, I don't hit this thing because then this happens. So this is a good use of AoE. Flesh. This thing has a couple, this is my favorite boss in DD1, by the way, but this thing has 2 attacks that hit 2 people. So it's a lot like Harvest Child. Harvest Child was pretty much based off of this boss. And so it hits the front 2 or the back 2. And you can, again, mitigate it. Like, it'll be clear when it's coming, because this boss has 4 parts that transform. So if you see these heads, it's going to hit the front too. If you see the butts, they're going to hit the back too. If you see the bones, they're going to try and stun you. And if you see the heart, you can hit the heart for big damage. Otherwise, it's going to try and heal. So there are a lot of moving pieces to this fight, and you can prepare in advance when you see stuff, and you can be proactive, which is nice. And it's not, oh, I made a mistake, now my entire party gets hit over and over and over until they're dead. And it's an RNG fight for sure, so it's a lot of reacting to what it's doing, but once you see what it's doing, you can be proactive, if that makes sense. So it's really cool. The Hag, this is a kidnap boss pretty much, and so what she does is she grabs someone and puts them in a cook pot to try and kill them, and that's like the main threats. And so there are ways around this. You can have a bunch of reach and try and burn her down before your person dies. You can free the person and heal them up and then go back to hitting the boss. Those are pretty much the 2 ways to deal with this fight, but you know, there's stuff to do. She does have 1 AoE attack, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I fought her. The Tenderizer, is it this? It looks like it. It says target 1 through 4, so I'm gonna assume it's that. But again, this is a lot like the Prophet, where if you're on death's door, this is just a way to check you, you know, if you messed up. But the threat isn't the AoE, the threat is the main boss mechanic, you know? So I like that a lot. There are some bosses that do use the AoE, just constant spam mechanic if you're punished, and that's Brigand Pounder, which is the implication, you know, from the second game. This is what it was based off of, because if you didn't know, there's some lore with the narrator in the first game where he calls the cannon a war machine of terrible implications. So that's why the cannon in the second game is named as such. But pretty much the same thing, but this is something preventable, you know. It's very clear what's happening. It comes with a matchman, and this dude is slow as hell. Like, it should never outspeed anyone. And if he survives in 1 turn, he's very weak, then he lights the cannon fuse, the cannon shoots you. Very easy to mitigate. Very easy to play around, easy to understand. So it's actually a pretty good use of it in this case. Whereas in the implications case, you can't really stop it. You can try and blind it, that's the best you got, or blocking, dodging. But, you know, you can make those arguments for a lot of the other stuff, I would say. But again, we're looking at other boss design here. So with Siren, the main mechanic is capturing your teammates. So you have to make sure you don't have a teammate that's going to get taken that will kill you immediately, and you can play around it. And it's actually an interesting fight for that reason. And you can even mitigate the mechanic by, you don't get to fully dictate who gets taken, but you can influence it. And that's really cool. So Siren, good fight. Drowned Crew, this one tries to pull someone out of position and then kill them with stress and a bit of damage. So again, doesn't hit the entire team all the time or whatever, so that's a really interesting way to do a boss. Crocodilian, a boss that isn't generally liked. And why is that? Because it'll hit 3 people with a super attack. It's just got a bunch of cleaves. This thing's a cleave monster. You know, it's got teeth rake, but it's got swarming corruption, hits a bunch of people. It's got, and then the other attack is Apex Predator, hits 2 people at Apprentice and 3 at Veteran Plus. But then, you know, you can still have bosses that have AoEs that aren't annoying. Baron, probably the best boss they've made, or at least one of the best bosses for sure that they made. Crimson Core DLC again. It does, like, Baron does have an AoE. He's got 1, and that's Crowd Pleaser. But even this is interesting. It has a chance of missing. The accuracy is not super high. Like 93 at Veteran is not high. And then the other thing too is it deals less damage the farther you are away from it. So even then, it's an interesting AoE, you know, because your frontline tanks are going to take more than your backline people. Whereas something like Sundering Exhalation, Limerence, they don't care. You take the same damage on everyone. So I think this is a much better way of doing an AoE attack. And that's not even the main thing of the fight. The main thing of the fight is the shell game that you play with him, where he hides in eggs, and you have to luck out and hit him or kill the ads that you spawn. So it's a super fun fight, right? This fight's amazing. And it just happens to have an AoE, but the AoE isn't like really silly and stupid, and it, you know, kills you in 2 hits. Viscount. This is another target priority type of thing, but also you have to be observant into what the boss does. So this boss spawns with 3 hanging bodies, which I don't know if they show us, but no, probably not. So when you do this fight, Viscount has 3 hanging bodies. They have different amounts of HP, and while you're fighting him, Viscount will eat the bodies and get buffs. So if you're paying attention, you can see what buff he gets from what body, and then kill those bodies to deny those buffs. So this is, you know, again, another cool way to do a boss. Countess, an amazing boss. Has a couple AoEs, but largely the thing in this fight is managing your party getting moved out of position. So she tries to beat you with action economy. She tries to beat you with attrition because she can heal herself. And then she has the eggs that she can put in you, the parasitic eggs, which will punish your damage dealers. So you have to have a way to keep them safe, usually with guard, like with Houndmaster or Man-at-Arms. Really cool, right? There's a lot going on in this fight. It's got multiple levels. It tries to win in a few different ways. Like I said, attrition, direct damage, and action economy. It doesn't just kill you by cleaving down your entire team. And even the bosses that I personally hate in DD1, like Guardian, you know, this boss, if you kill the 2 armaments with it, so the shield and the spear, then it cleaves your team down. But yeah, the whole thing with this one is to pick your spots for damage. And the only thing that really sucks with this fight, it's not even the AoE, it's that it takes so long, because this boss has 50 protection. And so you either need to bring 1 or 2 shield breakers or some other way to help deal with that, you know, high protection value, because you're not going to debuff it with things like target whistle. But it's still cool, at least for that, you know. It just, if it didn't take as long, this fight wouldn't suck. But it sucks because it takes so long, not because it hits everyone. And then we come to the Crimson Court bosses. So the Red Hook design couldn't, they couldn't keep themselves away from it, I guess. But what's interesting though with the Miller and the Sleeper is, what's not fun about them is that they just start spamming AoEs either later in the fight or the entire time. And what's the most interesting though is that these were the last bosses they made for DD1. And so at the end of DD1's development cycle, we have bosses that hit the entire party constantly, and that's like the idea of threat escalation. And then we go into DD2, and the bosses, you know, a lot of the tough encounters happen to hit the whole party as well. So I'm wondering if that just became the design philosophy, and they just didn't notice. But yeah, the Miller likes to hit you with this one attack called the Reaping. It does all this other stuff where it makes, you know, summons and uses them to guard him, and that's cool and fun. And then at some point, this boss stops caring and then starts spamming this attack called the Reaping, which hits your entire party, and just does it over and over and over again. But here we still have, you know, like the Baron descending damage order, so the front ranks take more than the back. I guess that's cool. I mean, if you're gonna do an AoE, at least it's got that. And then we have the Sleeper, which phase 1 of the Sleeper, very cool. You know, you have the, doesn't even show it, man. But you got the fractures, you know, the crystals that grow, and then you got the big crystal, and the whole thing is playing whack-a-mole while trying to do damage to the big crystal. And then it turns into this giant eyeball, and congratulations, it just hits your party over and over. So this boss sucks. And even here, I find some interesting things though. Like, I understand why they made it so this boss hits everyone all the time. And that's because this is in the game's endless mode. And so what it's trying to do is wear you down and either make you end the run or kill you at this boss. So I understand that. The other thing too that I find interesting is I'm thinking back to Obsession in DD2, where that thing has a 30% crit rate on everything. And in DD1, where crits were more frequent and easier to manage and mitigate for a few reasons, like, you know, restoration, you couldn't die to damage over time, stuff like that. This boss only has 19 on one attack, and it's got 3 on the other. So it's like, how do we get Obsession with 30% crit rate at all times in a game where crit is harder to come by? I mean, you can get tokens and stuff, but in DD1, you could routinely have damage dealers at like 30 to 40% crit, you know? So it's interesting that the game went that way. And here's my tinfoil hat theory that may or may not be right. I don't know, but it's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking of why AoE wasn't as common as the "this is how we're gonna kill you" type of thing for DD1 bosses, and I think it's because of Vestal. Vestal has Divine Comfort, which hits the entire party to heal them off a death's door or just HP, and she can use that every single turn. And I truly think in my heart of hearts that, especially since Vestal is part of Team Red Hook, which is the starter team, and I really think that a lot of the bosses were designed with her in mind, and that players are going to be taking her, so they have to do something to beat you that's not hitting your entire team. So that's how we get bosses that try and wear you down through attrition, try and kill you with affliction, try and kill you by moving you out of position. You know, there are a lot of other mechanisms that the bosses have in DD1 that's not just, hey, we're hitting the entire party. Since we don't have access to consistent AoE healing, you know, we only have Divine Comfort, which is a regen. Regen's not even that good in DD2. And so now we just have bosses that's the MO. You know, they're going to hit the entire party when something goes wrong. And I would really like to see that change. You know, here and there, 2-3 times throughout the game, maybe even 4, whatever. Okay. You know, some bosses, it's warranted. Does every boss need an AoE to punish you for the fact that the game doesn't give you consistent AoE healing through like one character? I don't think so. Also, Tangle General, or Dreaming General has 185 now. So I don't think this has been updated. Wiki team, we're taking time off, I guess. But yeah. So those are my thoughts. And let me know what you're thinking down below. I'm not saying I'm right in this. I'm just saying what I feel, and I would like to see some other things change. Like, one of the things that really jumps out at me too is in DD1 there were a couple enemies that would debuff themselves with some of their things. Like, I think the bloodsuckers, the mosquitoes, I think they would, actually it's all the way at the top, huh? I think they give themselves like a speed down penalty when they drink your blood and get fat. All right, so let's see, 20, where's the speed? 12, and let's get bloodlust. 12, does it not? Am I tripping? Let's see, the thirst. I'm very confident. I know one of the big things, like the not chevs, but with Esquire. Yeah, right here, right? See, look. So it uses the thirst, affects self, and loses accuracy and speed. And then it drains blight out of you, which it's really hard to blight these because they have high blight res. And so if you're blighted by one of the other attacks, like from Supplicant, because these like to blight you, then the mosquito can siphon the blight out of you and hurt itself. there aren't any interesting interactions like that in DD2. There's no enemy that uses an attack and lowers its own speed or dazes itself like we do. You know, we use Finale, we get dazed. We use Pirouette and stuff, we get dazed. Chaotic Offering stuns you sometimes. You know, it would be really cool if an enemy did something to power up and then like dazed itself and then you had a chance to stun it. You know, just something to play off of if you're prepared and paying attention, but that's just not in the game. So I really hope going forward we can get a few enemies that have some interesting stuff like that. I know we have Collector and Chirurgeon, however the hell you say it, are coming up. So, and we get like 6 more elite enemies that they haven't told us about yet. So I'm really hoping that we can return to interesting mechanics like this, because I think the game really needs it. You know, besides hero balance. So, those are my thoughts. That's the end of the video. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.